Flammable and combustible item. The health and safety item we used to call flammable materials improperly stored under UPCS has been given the very slightest update under Inspire. Its new name is flammable and combustible item, and its level of severity and therefore its scoring value has been bumped up. It is now considered life-threatening, and its scoring value is 2.4 in a unit, 2.18 inside, and 1.98 outside. The longer definition has become more specific, stating that a combustible material is any material that, in the form in which it is used and under the conditions anticipated, will ignite and burn or will add appreciable heat to an ambient fire. The deficiency occurs when there is improperly stored flammable or combustible item on or near an ignition source. Deficiency: flammable or combustible item is on or within 3 feet of an appliance that provides heat for thermal comfort or a fuel-burning water heater. Improperly stored chemicals. And we'll come back to that subject. More information: excluding heating oil in a heating oil tank, petroleum products, for example gasoline, kerosene, or propane, should never be stored in the unit or inside areas. A combustible item in its original container and stored in a safe place, for example under a sink or in a hall closet, etc., is not a deficiency. Electrical components should not be evaluated as ignition sources under this standard. So that's a pretty short definition, but let's discuss it a little bit. A combustible item in its original container. What they're trying to convey here is that an item you can purchase in a grocery store or in your favorite Walgreens pharmacy should be suitable for storage in a normal home, as long as it's not something volatile stored close to a source of extreme heat. If you think about propane tanks, when you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, the propane tanks are in a cage outdoors, and there's a sign on the door saying, "Don't bring your propane tank into the building." If we don't want it inside the store, we don't want it inside the house. So something like a can of lighter fluid that you could buy in a grocery store, stored under the sink, stored in a closet, away from a gas stove or a gas water heater, should be perfectly safe and should not be cited. The thing I really wanted to come back to was the unfortunate phrase, improperly stored chemicals. Why did they have to include the phrase improperly stored chemicals? Anyone with years of experience in this field knows that there are always a few inspectors who, for whatever reason, cannot resist taking these definitions to their most literal and ridiculous extremes. Sometimes this is done with the best of intentions, mindful of the safety of the human beings who live in these homes that we're inspecting. Under UPCS, we had a document called Compilation Bulletin 4.0 version 3. It was published in 2017. It contained an instruction to inspectors as follows. In a unit, if flammable items are found on top of the stove or stored inside the oven, for example, a pizza box, plastic containers, bags, etc., it shall be recorded as hazards, any other hazard. That deficiency was non-scoring. The idea here, presumably, was that the property management cannot possibly be aware of and control the contents of every oven on the property. That would violate the privacy of the residents, for one thing, and it would require just a ridiculous amount of effort to know what's in every single oven at any given moment. Besides, if you take a pizza out of its box and put it in the oven, or a turkey or a cake for that matter, you turn the heat up high enough and leave it in there long enough, it will eventually burst into flames. Should we be writing up a turkey in the oven as flammable combustible materials? I don't think so. The oven's made to contain heat, and even a small fire of the sort that you get with a turkey or a pizza box. Sadly, that instruction is now absent from the Inspire protocol. We would have hoped that the new definition would have made it unnecessary. However, despite the existence of this written instruction for the last 6 years, there are still inspectors who are citing this under flammable materials instead of hazards other. Right up to the last UPCS inspection, I write appeals for people. That's one of my most common appeals. Some of these inspectors were HUD quality assurance reps whose job it is to know these rules backwards and forwards intimately because they train other inspectors. So sometimes this kind of overzealousness is a concern for safety. Sometimes it's authority gone to someone's head, and at other times, I suspect there are even 1 or 2 inspectors out there who feel it's their duty to punish everyone who participates in spending their tax dollars on affordable housing. We have to realize that becoming an inspector does not make one a rocket scientist or a nuclear physicist. A nuclear physicist, on the other hand, might realize that there are chemicals that are not combustible. Dihydrogen monoxide, for example, is a chemical that's not combustible or flammable, but it's often used as an industrial solvent. It's present in every home in America, and the presence of excessive quantities in the air can contribute to the growth of mold and mildew, while inhalation of excessive amounts of this chemical can cause death by drowning. That chemical, dihydrogen monoxide, is also known as water, H2O. Yes, water is a chemical, according to the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Do I think inspectors are going to start writing up a case of water bottles as flammable and combustible materials? No, I don't. But I've seen inspectors do some things that were nearly as silly, including the phrase improperly stored chemicals is just an invitation to stupidity.